RFK goes on Fox News and destroys Kamala Harris for calling Donald Trump Hitler. If you don't recall, RFK's been a Democrat his whole life, just like his entire family. Even he is leaving the Democratic Party to serve in Donald Trump's cabinet. What does that tell you? Democrats, they are a threat to democracy. All they do is preach hate, ramp up the rhetoric, and that rhetoric has caused 3 attempts on Donald Trump's life. Let's jump right into the video.
Yes, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is just getting dressed right now. He wants us to buy a little bit of money. Oh, he is dressed. All right. He also is an independent candidate. As you know, he's going to play a key role with the Trump administration. Should there be a Trump 2 on Tuesday, and should we get a verdict actually on election night? That'll be great. So Robert F. Kennedy Jr., ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. So I know you've lived a lot of your life in Washington, D.C. What did you make of the fact that the Washington Post announced inexplicably on Friday, we're not going to endorse a candidate? And then Jeff Bezos has come out and he said, you know what? We want people to decide on their own.
Oh, the Washington Post, when I was little, did not endorse candidates, and it only started doing that recently. The problem I have with the Washington Post is the bias in the newsroom.
Front page.
Right, because traditionally you would have an unbiased reporting by the New York Times and the Washington Post, and then the editorial board would meet and vote, and they'd endorse a candidate, and there was supposed to be a Chinese wall between them. But in recent years, they have become blatantly partisan, and I think that's a tragedy for the news because there's really, there is very.
So here you have a top Democrat for years. His whole bloodline is Democrats saying that Democratic news and media outlets are not telling the truth. That's what he's saying. Make no ifs, ands, buts about it. He's saying that liberal news stations aren't telling the truth.
Very few sources of nonpartisan news left, except, of course, right here.
All right, good answer.
How do you feel, though, about the media at large, though? Painting the Trump supporters that you were at that event in New York, Madison Square Garden. They're painting them all as Nazi supporters, as racist. And this used to be your party. It used to be the part of inclusion, of open debate. But that's changed. Why?
Yeah, at the beginning of this campaign, I made a statement about Anne Frank during a speech, and I wasn't referring to saying anything reminded me of Nazism. I was talking about the rise of totalitarian systems of AI and facial recognition that give totalitarian systems the capacity to control so much of our behavior and to surveil us. And for about 5 months after that, I was called an anti-Semite for invoking the Nazi era. And here you have the leading Democrats in the last couple of weeks and the press. MSNBC has been really appalling.
Insane.
Mm-hmm. And the vice president. And there's no link.
Again, a huge Democrat from a gigantic, powerful Democratic family calling NBC News atrocious.
I don't even think Madison Square Garden existed in 1939.
Right. It came 1968. It moved to Penn State.
Right. So they're invoking this 1939 meeting of Nazis, and they're saying that somehow there's a reunion. And you go in that, there was a joke made during the speech by one comedian, and the crowd. I was in the crowd at that time, and they groaned. These were not, no
one was laughing.
Nobody was laughing, and there was so much joy in the room, and optimism, and patriotism, and idealism about our country, and it was the opposite of Nazism, and the need to use that most evocative and explosive and incendiary and poisonous reference. And it's being used across the top ranks of the Democratic Party. It's Hillary Clinton. It's Kamala. I think it's bad for our country. And by the way,
he said that Kamala Harris and Hillary Clinton are spitting out and venom at Donald Trump. I got to say it for the third time. He's been a Democrat his whole life. His entire family, super powerful Democrats. And this is his stance on Kamala Harris's rhetoric.
So many of us, when we were kids in this country, were asked to answer, to consider the moral quandary. Would you, if you could go back in time, would you kill baby Hitler before he could do all the damage? And most of us answer, yeah, we would do that. So when you compare an American political figure to Hitler, who was about to become president,
Right.
The kind of people who are already a little unstable, you're really suggesting to them that this man should be killed before he gets into office.
President Trump brought that up yesterday. He goes, "You guys going to get me?"
Let's not just turn the page on that. He's saying that Kamala Harris and Democrats are responsible for the assassination attempts on Donald Trump's life. That's what he just said.
Shot again. And he goes, "When I was younger, my dad told me never bring up that word Nazi in my house. And now I'm being called it." And he said, "You're going to get me shot again."
Right.
By the way, they did a study. They said how many people have a great deal, if not a fair amount of trust in the media. Only 31% said yes, they trust the media. That was at 40% in 2012, and it used to be over 70%.
When my uncle was president, it was 85%.
85.
When you had Walter Cronkite and people like that, and the media was really focused on telling the truth to the American public.
When your uncle was president, 6% of Americans had chronic disease. Now it's 60. Add a zero to that.
Yeah.
You've talked a lot about this. You walked in here and you gave everyone in the audience these Make America Healthy Again hats. As a mom, as Americans, we appreciate what you're doing because we're getting older and we're thinking about, we want to live a long life. We want to see our grandchildren. I want to see my grandchildren walk in.
For anybody that doesn't know, Trump is bringing him into the cabinet for a huge reason, and that's to make America healthy again by outlawing and banning certain ingredients in all the foods in America that's making everyone sick. In other countries, they have like 300 ingredients that are banned from foods that are allowed in America. So this is an important job for RFK, and Trump is a genius for bringing them in.
Go to Europe and you might eat pizza in Italy and you don't feel bad and you don't gain weight. We want to know why that happens here in America and what you're going to do. But first, let's play the soundbite. This is Donald Trump at the rally at MSG.
Look, we're not going to let him go too crazy, Elon, with the oil and gas stuff. And, because Robert F. Kennedy cares more about human beings and health and the environment than anybody. And he's going to be absolutely, having him is such a great honor. I've been friends of his for a long time. And I'm going to let him go wild on health. I'm going to let him go wild on the food. I'm going to let him go wild on medicines. The only thing I don't think I'm going to let him even get near is the liquid gold that we have under our feet.
What was your reaction to that?
Well, he always says that, and I get it. But what he's right is, we have the sickest children in the world right now. There's nobody in the world that has that. When I was a kid, the autism rate among American children and in 70-year-old men today, in my generation, is 1 in 10,000. In my children's generation, it's 1 in every 34 kids, 1 in every 22 boys. And the diabetes, a typical physician, when I was a kid, would see 1 case of juvenile diabetes in his lifetime, or a 40 or 50-year career. Today, 1 out of every 3 kids who walks through his office door is diabetic or pre-diabetic. And it's costing us $4.3 trillion a year. It costs zero we paid zero for chronic disease when my uncle was president. Today, it's the biggest expense, 5 times our military budget. It's easy to fix. We have 1,000 ingredients in our foods that are illegal in Italy and other countries in Europe.
1,000, I was wrong.
And the reason for that is corruption. At the food industry and the agriculture, big agricultural producers control FDA. And so they're not worried about public health. They're worried about advancing the mercantile interests of those corporations. And they've let them do things. The companies, the big cereal companies, make 2 kinds of cereals, like Fruit Loops.
corporations destroying everything in America. Who would have ever guessed? The downfall of America. Corporations and the dark money that they funnel to politicians to be corrupt.
In our country is just loaded with chemicals and food dyes that are carcinogenic, that they're going to cause ADHD in your kids. If you go across the border to Canada or to Europe, you have the same product, but it has no dyes in it.
Right.
It has good ingredients. So these companies know how to do it.
Right.
If they can get away with it here.
Do you know how you'd approach fixing it? I want to talk that. I want you to answer that. But first, I want you to go to the studio audience. James, you're over there. You have a question for Robert F. Kennedy Jr.?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for just taking our questions and being here. But we all know that access to healthy foods is not always easy or affordable for many. What are some ways that you hope to change this?
Yeah.
Well, first of all, I would say that you cannot afford to eat bad foods because it's going to affect your health and you're going to pay later on. And, you know, with food, we can solve the diabetes crisis. Most people who have diabetes or pre-diabetic can be cured with good food. And if they choose instead to be cured by Ozempic, the government then pays $1,500 a month for the rest of their lives. And with a fraction of that, we could give everybody organic foods 3 meals a day in this country. What I would do is, you know, the first thing I do isn't going to cost you anything because I'm just going to tell the cereal companies to take all the dyes out of their food.
It seems pretty
give us
simple.
the same cereal. President Trump was cooking him at McDonald's the other day and giving people French fries. And people criticized me, and they said, well, you know, he's out there giving fast food. And I said, I don't have anything against fast food. I'm against food that has seed oils. When I was a kid, McDonald's was made with tallow fat. That was good for you. And your body needs that. It makes you healthy.
Great.
Why aren't we making it with tallow fat again? In England, McDonald's has a McDonald's French fry has 3 ingredients in it, like potato, sugar, and some, you know, oil or tallow. Yeah, salt. Sorry, potatoes, salt, and some tallow fat. In our country, it has 17 ingredients.
Wow.
Oh, and none of them are good for you.
Okay, well, obviously something's got to give. Lynn, right in the front row, RFK has got a question for you. Lynn?
Hi. I grew up a Bostonian where the Kennedy name is sacrosanct. How did you get the courage to stand up against the liberal media and your famous family?
Well, I was led one thing to another. I saw what the truth that was happening to our kids. And I had to make a choice between whether I was going to try to help people get healthy again. And then there were other reasons that I left the Democratic Party. The party that I grew up with was the party of peace. It was the party of constitutional rights and civil rights. It was the party of that stood up to Wall Street and the big corporations. Today's Democratic Party is the party of war. It's the party of censorship. It's the party of surveillance. It's the party of big tech, big ag, big banking, the military-industrial complex, and big ag, and big food, and big pharma. And so I didn't leave the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party left
You
me.
tried to run as a Democrat, and they locked you out. They wouldn't put you on the ballot.
Before they go to the next question and just turn the page. So RFK wanted to run in the primary. And the craziest thing about all of this, and I'm a forever Trumper, he probably would have beat Trump. But since Obama and Pelosi can't control him, they didn't let him run. They just installed Kamala Harris, and they'd rather lose the election. Well, their thing is, we're going to cheat, we're going to lie, we're going to steal, we're going to do everything we can to win, so it doesn't matter anyway. But let's hope that that doesn't happen. But let's say it's a fair election and Trump wins. RFK could have probably beat Trump and a Democrat would have won. But they're so corrupt and so insane, they'd rather lose. Unless they can control the candidate, that is.
Hey, Janelle, what is your question?
About 100,000 schools participate in the USDA's national lunch program during the year. If you're given a position by the Trump administration in the agricultural department, what will you do to improve school lunches?
I'll get processed food out of school lunch immediately. About half the school lunch program goes to processed food. About 70% of food stamps go to processed food. 10% of food stamps go to sugar drinks, to sodas. We're creating diabetes problem in our kids by giving them food that's poison, and I'm going to stop that.
Robert, we got to let you go. Quick question. You were talking about the difference from the McDonald's here versus another country, or the Fruit Loops here versus another country. What's the reason why? Like, if they know how to make it already, why aren't we doing it?
It's because it's cheaper for them to put the chemicals. Yeah, and President Trump wants to get the chemicals out. And he wants to make us healthy because in the long run, that's cheaper for our country.
Right.
It's America. America is the best at everything. We need to be the best at food, too.
There you go. Ladies and gentlemen, RFK Jr.
Isn't it great when you can have somebody in politics or RFK in Trump's cabinet answer questions? So he went to a live audience. They could ask him any questions they want, and he answered the questions. Kamala Harris, this interview lasted 13 minutes. Kamala Harris could never in a million years do something like this. Trump is the only answer. Trump 2024.